Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Human Capital and Resources Networking Group. This is our second meeting. We're calling this the April edition. We're meeting bi-monthly. Just a quick reminder of the mission statement of this group. We're bringing together human capital professionals from both sides of the Atlantic to create and exchange expertise on French American labor relations, regulations, and just overall emerging trends in this era of rapid workplace restructuring. Today's speakers is myself, and then we also have Cliff as well. Here's our quick bios. And today, our topic, we're focusing on labor market trends and how they're impacting talent acquisition. We've seen since COVID a tremendous evolution in this space. There was a lot of hiring freezes, we know, in 2020. The nature of how recruitment happened, moving that all virtually during 2020, and now what we're seeing in 2021, we're really interested in. So Cliff and I thought it would be really interesting if we give some of our own perspectives. Cliff's from the external recruiting side, mine more from the corporate side, and then lead into a broader discussion on this topic. So with that being said, maybe Cliff, you had some data points to bring to us around employment, unemployment, where we're at right now, if we want to dive right in.
Sure. Thanks, Ann. I wanted to start at least by introducing myself. So I'm Cliff Rusnak. I'm with MWorks Search here in Chicago. So as Ann had mentioned, I am a specialty recruiting firm, and we work with manufacturing clients, helping them build their teams primarily within the engineering and operations departments. Prior to that, I grew up and started my career within manufacturing with a leading French company. And ultimately, that manufacturing background and experience helped me build this business that I'm doing today. As Ann and I both spoke, we talked a little bit about the current labor market, current trends in recruiting. Certainly, I'm on the external recruiting side of the fence, and Ann's on the internal side. So I thought it'd be interesting to highlight some of the common challenges and trends we're seeing, as well as some of the differences. Before I jump into that, I did want to take a look at some of the current facts and figures, because we've been in a pandemic since late Q1, first quarter last year, and hiring and employment has changed dramatically. One thing that I've seen within my world, which is the manufacturing world, is the activity has been fairly constant, if not robust. So I wanted to look at some of the employment and business activity numbers to highlight where we stand today versus last year, and then also touch on some of the challenges and trends that I'm seeing within manufacturing. So I looked first at economic activity in the first quarter of this year, and I pulled up some facts and figures from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. And first quarter 2021 GDP growth was 6.4%. So the economic activity and growth was extremely strong, even though we still haven't technically come out of the pandemic. So secondly, I looked at employment and unemployment figures, and I pulled some data from March 2021, so last month, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and total unemployment was 6% last month. So how do those numbers compare, and how do they sort of match up to 12 months ago prior to the pandemic? So looking at the workforce, meaning the number of people who are not employed but would like to have a job, so job seekers. So according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are 6.9 million people that are currently not working who are actively looking to find a job. Comparing that to February of 2020, there were 5.1 million people looking for jobs that were unemployed. So I wanted to see how that compared to the number of job openings to get an indication of the number of jobs that are out there based or compared to the number of job seekers. So as of February 2021, and this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics again, there were 7.4 million job openings. So doing simple math, there's about a half a million more job openings currently than there are people looking for jobs. So even though we're still in a pandemic, even though we're still struggling, the numbers from a supply and demand standpoint say that there are more jobs than people looking for jobs, even with unemployment at 6%. So as Ann and I talked, I talked about the robustness and the activity we see in working with manufacturing clients and trying to identify candidates. I wanted to make a list of some of the challenges and some of the trends that I see in the manufacturing space. So there have been a number of challenges and trends. The first one is physical location. Typically, when a company is hiring, a job has a physical location, and more we see people that are either unable or not willing to relocate. So that certainly makes hiring more difficult if you have jobs that are located in places where persons are not currently living. The second one that has become a bigger, I would say, challenge in the past year is inability or unwillingness to travel. Even for jobs that I would consider not necessarily travel related jobs, jobs that may have 20 to 30% travel, more and more I'm hearing from candidates say that they are not interested in travel, period. Another element that's coming up more and more is the workplace. Individuals have become accustomed to working remotely or working from home, whereas in manufacturing, more and more of the clients we work with have either been in a work from office setting or have been trending back to the office. And candidates are increasingly looking for either a remote work option or a work from home option or element. Another challenge that I see in manufacturing is just the skills gap. There aren't people with experience in the technical skills, the engineering skills that manufacturers and employers require. Um, Two other challenges that come up, and Ann and I talked a lot about this in our previous conversations, is no name manufacturing struggles to recruit. Individuals think of brands like Mondelez, Boeing, Ford, Facebook, Apple. They don't think of no name manufacturing organizations when seeking out new jobs. So, mid market companies, especially companies that are there that have been around yet are behind the radar, struggle to attract talent simply because we don't know their name. And we'll probably never know their name if we're not in that specific industry. And the last point I'll mention as a challenge that I've seen, and I think Ann has also seen this, is just candidate engagement. I look at my metrics as a recruiter very regularly. And if I look at my candidate engagement metrics for 2020, they range, depending on the month and project, between 15% and almost 30%. In January of this year, my candidate engagement was 4%. So even though we're in a pandemic, even though unemployment is maybe high, depending on how you look at that, candidates are increasingly harder to connect with, if you will. So what are some of the trends in manufacturing that I see as a manufacturing recruiter? The first one, and I think this is general, it's the graying of the workforce. Demographically, more persons are leaving or getting ready to leave the workforce at a time when many companies, at least the ones I work with, do not have a bench. So as individuals retire, they don't have anybody coming up behind them that is trained and has experience doing what they need them to do. So that's a big problem, and it's going to be a bigger problem going forward. The second trend I see in manufacturing is just a lack of interest in manufacturing. Individuals today are not interested in manufacturing. Typically, it's been hard work. It's been more of a 24/7 environment. So it has perhaps not the best reputation as far as a work environment, and individuals just don't have an interest in going into more traditional manufacturing sectors. Um, the other element that's impacting my world is the dearth of persons going into technical fields. There just aren't enough persons going into engineering disciplines, going to school for engineering related fields at a time when there's increasing amount of demand for that type of talent. So I know that's a pretty big laundry list of challenges and trends, but those are sort of the highlights of the things that I see as far as challenges and trends within the manufacturing space.
Thanks. That is really interesting. Thanks for all the facts and figures as well. Maybe just a quick intro to of myself. As Cliff mentioned, I'm at Mondelez International. I've been there for about 9 years. FMCG, 80,000 employees worldwide. So we do have manufacturing as well as other corporate roles, sales, a dearth of functional roles. But what Cliff's remarks really resonate with me. And I think during 2020, and also what I heard from a lot of peers in HR, peer companies, there's a lot of hiring freezes happening during 2020. And I think that really shook up the whole labor market itself. And I think accelerated a lot of now the repercussions that we're feeling now in 2021. I think what really resonates for me is that mention of skill, like a skills gap. That's been an ongoing conversation within HR. Is how to find the right talent. The talent doesn't have the right skills. How do you upskill? And I think that's ongoing, and then now that's been compounded with some of these other issues that the COVID-19 has brought on, and especially around the flexibility to work. I think the demographics and the aging workforce is a really important one. As Cliff mentioned, younger generations, they are looking for the big names to get on their resume. They're going to target those companies first in their job search. So I'm sure those companies are facing an inundation of candidates. And what do you do with the smaller companies, potentially those that have the locations that are more remote locations, less urban? And if there's an expectation you have to be there in the office, we have seen during 2020 an expectation that there's going to be ongoing a lot of flexibility. And I think we're going to see a lot of companies have to struggle with that, how to make that decision. Do they go back to their more traditional workplace structure, or are we going to see the ability to have more flexibility there? I think that's going to be a huge decision making point for leaders within their own company, what makes sense for their culture, and for their own business strategy. So yeah, so Cliff, I'm wondering, what do you think is going to happen later this year with the situation we're in?
I think a couple things in starting to have conversations with manufacturing clients about the current situation and how to address it. The one sort of quick fix that we see is employers perhaps being open to individuals that don't have a very direct skill set match to what they're looking for. Previously, our clients would typically have a fairly strict set of requirements for a candidate to fill a specific role. Now, I think we're going to see those requirements be a little bit more flexible, and see employers be open to candidates that are coming from a different industry and can perhaps transition to a new role in a different industry. So short term, I think that's one thing they are doing and going to be doing more of. Secondly, having some flexibility, or a greater level of flexibility than perhaps they would have previously, with regard to more flexible work requirements in terms of having a work from home or telecommuting component.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think especially around the expectation of previous experience. And I think that's very true too, as you mentioned, trying to hire for younger talent, looking for potentially those transferable skills and the future ability of those workers. And I think that's really important too, right? If we're looking at talent management and succession planning, that probably the more traditional companies, potentially manufacturing, need to kind of shift their mindset a bit and how they're approaching candidates.
Good point, and I think you touched on a really good point. Is clients may be looking for 5 to 10 years experience, but with that lack of talent, they're certainly more open to bringing on an early career individual, or perhaps an entry level individual that's got the basic skill set and willing to learn and grow within a team.
And maybe switching gears a little bit to talk more around the relocation and kind of the location of the job. Are you noticing that too, to have those conversations with some of your clients if they need to be a bit more flexible? Because I can imagine in a manufacturing setting that has an extra set of challenges where you expect someone to be on site in the plant, as you said, on call 24/7.
Yeah, I still think that's going to be a hurdle that'll be difficult to overcome for many employers. Most of the manufacturers I work with have manufacturing and engineering teams on site, and it's really hard to disassociate the work and the person from the workplace when they like to have that collaboration between engineering and operations and quality. So I think we're going to see more openness to maybe not being in the office 100% of the time. But I think when companies have facilities in a specific location, the role and the job will still be tied to that facility or office.
Mm. Yeah, very, very interesting. It's going to be, I can see the challenges they're having right now with this.
Yeah. And if we look at some employers, I've got one client in Northwest Ohio, which is heavily dependent on the automotive sector, which has been strong, so to speak. These employers are competing with the automotive sector for a more shrinking population of factory personnel. Got another machinery maker in the Milwaukee area, same thing, just struggling to find more traditional manufacturing roles that typically have been good paying roles. Just are more of those jobs than individuals to fill them.
And maybe around, you touched on earlier around the candidate engagements. And I expect now, have you seen an uptick in that and around, yeah, what if candidates are ghosting, how to manage through that with your client expectations?
I think it's just harder to engage with individuals. I think at any level. When I started in this business 11 years ago, it was a phone-based business. You'd make a phone call and leave a message and get a call back in many cases. Today, you make a phone call, leave a message, never get a call back. You send an email, you email and never get an email back. Now you have to engage via social media through LinkedIn. You have to have a cell phone number to text. So trying to communicate with individuals has become much less productive because you're having to communicate through these 3 to 4 different channels just to have a greater chance of connecting with someone at a time where it's very acceptable to not respond to a call, an email, a text, or a LinkedIn message. So looking at my January numbers, they were 4%. I looked at numbers in March. I think they were 11 or 12%. So they're still below what I saw about a year ago. And we're seeing it across the board within our network and with colleagues, just a growing difficulty in connecting with and engaging with individuals.
Yeah, and I can say for larger peer companies as well, I think that's in this day and age, it is challenging, and employer branding is becoming more and more important. So I can see for smaller companies how that struggle there, like how to leverage technology um, right now and engage with employees via social media. It's highly important. And Andrea, I'm interested from the French American Chamber of Commerce perspective. What have you heard from other client members around this space?
Um,
Probably closer around the relocation and immigration topic.
so there are definitely some issues around around just being able to recruit from France right now, which has clearly been an issue. Um, you know, I think that Cliff, some of the topics that you mentioned also, what do you? I mean, some of these things are are a bit worrying. So you mentioned the short-term solution to some of these skills gaps, but what do you see as maybe some of the longer term structural things that need to be addressed? Is it a disconnect between workforce training programs, university programs, and where the industry is going? What could be some of the solutions to that issue?
It's a complex issue, and I don't know if there's any one right answer. I think the first answer is more immigration, allowing more persons to immigrate that have that technical skill set and would be apt and open to these type of roles. The second one is maybe more of a long-term approach in terms of trying to encourage young people to go into technical fields. But I think it's tough. To be an engineer, you have to be smart. And when you go to college, you have to go to class and work hard. And then when you finish your engineering curriculum, you're going to have a degree and a job, but you're not necessarily going to be paid very well, so to speak, or relatively speaking. And if you do, get through your engineering program, chances are you're going to want to work for a big name company, as Ann mentioned, to build your resume. There's a perception that working in a big corporate environment is better than not with many individuals. I think it's a real challenge. So I'm not sure if there's any one solution other than we have to maybe look at and explore many different paths to get more people to go into these fields, because everything that surrounds us, any physical object, is made somewhere by probably a person. You can only automate so much. So people are going to be involved in engineering and manufacturing, albeit to a lesser extent going forward. But people are needed to engineer and make the things that we touch and surround us day in and day out. And we're going to have real issues if we don't figure out how to get more people interested in these industries that aren't very sexy, but are pervasive in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, and maybe a couple thoughts there. I think too, those potential young engineers, I mean, they are likely targeting more technology fields, like more
That's right.
technology software fields. And we know those are the employers that, because they don't have like the physical capital and the physical constraints, have developed very robust and flexible workplaces that speak to a younger generation that wants that flexibility. They can work when they want, just it's a matter of getting it done versus having to be somewhere and expected to be there potentially on call 24/7, whatever those shifts may be. And I think it's and then I'll put this out there too. I think it's also there's some cultural differences, right? I think it's how can other potentially Europe-based companies that have a more traditional mindset potentially adapt to some of this as well, and those expectations around the younger, more flexible working place conditions. So I think you're going to have those physical constraints, and I think it's getting creative. Probably what else can you offer, what are the benefits to your industry that you can't get somewhere else. And I think maybe it's around making sure there's enough innovation and creativity to bring in that top talent to make it more interesting in the manufacturing field. Just a few thoughts there.
Okay. It seems like there's a lot happening right now at the intersection of technology, innovation, and manufacturing. Is that sort of could that be the wave of the way of the future for a new manufacturing workforce that would have that sort of double skill set and might attract a new generation into the field?
I'll let Cliff respond, but I would say yes, and I would say it's even more broad than just manufacturing and engineering roles. I heard an article recently that said every company is a tech company now. You need to have that technology. You need to have those talents to bring that in. So again, I think it's going to be up to the company leaders what they do with that, and I think there's definitely going to be some that are going to be left behind versus others who figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Every company is in a way a technology company, and new technologies being implemented and integrated into what I would say more traditional manufacturing via the Internet of Things, via the growth of sensor technology. We have a client here in the Chicago suburbs that's building a team to implement Internet of technology into all of their manufacturing sites and distribution points, so they can connect what they're doing, all the physical assets they have that are producing or logistically transporting something, and leverage that data to do better on multiple levels. So I think you're going to see more technology in old technology firms. It'll become a bigger part of the day-to-day.
And maybe another broader comment too, around thinking around traditional jobs versus skills. I think that's another conversation point, Rush, especially around talent acquisition. When you can't find the right talent, it's are you looking for talent in the right way? And I think that's an interesting concept that's starting to develop too, that you're looking more for skills versus that experience that we talked about earlier. What is that job description on a piece of paper? And the skills actually needed to do that job could be quite different. And I think too, it's how talent acquisition leaders are thinking about that too, to target the right talent. And I think there's something around social media to make sure you're targeting the right candidates as well from that aspect.
That sort of leads me to another question I had about what you mentioned about the issues that a so-called no-name company might have, right, compared to a company that has a global reputation. Is there also a way to frame for a candidate? Is there a way to frame those opportunities as maybe a chance to develop some really marketable skills, to have more job responsibility, to really be engaged in a lot more, sort of more hands-on, valuable type of work than somebody might be able to if they were working for a bigger name company. I mean, I assume that you have to be, if you're recruiting for some of these companies that might have the reputation, but maybe they're doing something different and innovative and new and cool that it would offer an opportunity to a candidate that they couldn't get somewhere else.
I'll speak to that. That's a really great point, because I think there's a lot of benefits that come from a larger employer. You have that structure in place, those best practices. Something that is always more challenging the larger the company in infrastructure is around innovation, actually. So it can be that the smaller companies are more nimble, and at the same time, potentially in those types of roles, you have more autonomy or just a wider scope of responsibility versus a larger employer. So I think that's where, for me, it also comes back to it's targeting the right candidate and kind of figuring that out is what's more important to the candidate probably at that time in their career, and focusing your employer branding a bit around that, and probably for the jobs you're trying to fill to make that right connection. Oh, Cliff, you're on mute.
That's a good point. And I have a client and I asked this client recently, they're about 150-year-old French company. And I said, why would somebody want to work for you? What's the benefit? What's the hook?
Yeah.
That it's really simple, Cliff. We're going to know your name. If you come work with our organization, we're going to know your name and you're going to have a real big impact on the organization, and we'll have tangible results based on your contributions. So I think it comes back to a point you said, for individuals that are looking for more structure, maybe a larger organization is better. Certainly, I grew up in a smaller mid-market company where there was less structure than possibly in a large global organization. But the benefit of that being the exposure, I was exposed to so many things I never would have been exposed to in a large global corporation. And that exposure opened up doors to new opportunities for me throughout my career. So each situation is different. Each setting is perhaps not right for different individuals, but there's certainly benefits to working in a large organization as well as in a smaller organization, depending on what the individual is looking for.
And I'm actually going to take this now from the candidate perspective. I've had some of the similar experience earlier in my career as well, like Cliff. And I think it's also a matter of those coaches and talent acquisition coaching candidates, right? Those upcoming potential employees. I'm even for their profiles on LinkedIn, are they setting the right tone of what they're looking for, what their expectations are? I think that's also where employers struggle, right? To weed through finding just the right candidate. I think it's a matter of your personal branding. So there's one, the employer branding and the personal branding side as well.
That's interesting. It sounds like there should be more, as people are thinking about how to present themselves to employers, just also an emphasis about thinking how you would think about promoting transferable skills and saying, this is what I do now, this is my role, but this is how this experience and these skills could translate to maybe a slightly different type of position where maybe I would have to do some content training, but I could do the job. That's
exactly. And I think on the talent acquisition side, being open to hearing that perspective of those transferable skills, I think that's going to become more and more important. Yeah.
Yeah, and about that, I had a question, because what the first thing you're looking for when you're targeting candidates, and how your expectations change as employer with the COVID-19? if it's changed?
It's a good question. There's been a lot of actually discussion around key leadership skills. So I think any employer, right, they're always looking at candidates. Is this going to be a potential leader, the next leader in our company, right? And not for every role, but for a lot of them, the more professional roles. I think the empathy is a big one. I hear that over and over again. I think just more of a human-centric mindset, a growth mindset, and I think just around creativity and that flexibility that we've seen that. We're still in uncharted waters, so we need those folks who can take those risks, but also say that didn't work out and be willing to accept that. I think that's a big shift. And I think definitely in corporate America that's becoming more and more prominent. I think it's still taking time to get there, but as that's discussed more and more, it's definitely coming to the forefront.
And do you have like advices for candidates who try to emphasize that on resume or on social media like LinkedIn?
Cliff, maybe you want to jump in there too on the recruiter side, what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think I talk to a lot of people and I engage with a lot of people on social media via LinkedIn. I think what I look for perhaps is really no different than what I would have looked for previously on a resume. I just look for a LinkedIn profile that is professional, well organized, and will allow me to quickly identify who you are in what you do. I don't spend a lot of time looking at resumes. I don't spend a lot of time looking at a LinkedIn profile. I'm going to scan it really quickly. So there has to be something there that'll catch my eye, that'll force me to slow down and stop to make a decision whether or not I'm going to add you to a recruiting list or not. So whether it's a resume or a LinkedIn profile, keep it professional, keep it well formatted, well organized. If it's LinkedIn, put a picture of yourself on there where you're smiling and professionally dressed, and keep it professional, and put words in your LinkedIn profile that are going to describe who you are, and make sure those words which describe who you are going to be the words that I would use to find you. In other words, if you're an engineer, a mechanical engineer, you would want to put that multiple times in your profile. So as I'm searching mechanical engineer, your profile comes up. So you want to do everything you can to increase the likelihood that someone like me is going to stop, look, and ultimately try to engage with you.
And maybe a couple comments on my side. I think also what I'm hearing from Cliff, I'll bring it back to the branding, right? An employer branding, candidates want to know what the company stands for. The technical skills, definitely you want to have that as a candidate. Clear, use those keywords so you're easily searchable. But candidates themselves are looking at companies, like what do they stand for? And that's becoming more and more prominent. I think that goes back to like this more human-centric positioning in the marketplace due to what everyone has gone through it's a human experience through the pandemic. And it's between the candidate and the employer to find those synergies together. They're going to be looking for that consistent story, that they stand up for their own values. So I think it's also important as a job seeker that you're putting out there your own values, because that's how you're also going to get tied to the right company as well. They'll find you.
That's interesting. You sort of forget that now it is also becoming more important for the company to put themselves out there a little bit more and be more transparent about who they are, give sort of hints into the company culture and what they represent, and sort of what allow you to imagine what it would be like to be part of that team. So that's
exactly. And I'd like to think that's a part of what through technology, thanks to technology, we can move beyond just talking about, can you do this job, right? And work 9 to 5 and get it done. It's more about like what things mean to ourselves. And we want to have more of a company that feels living and breathing than just, yeah, a moneymaker.
And this is a much bigger topic and potentially for a future meeting. But I mean, I think that all of this leads to the question of, are we even interviewing people in the right way? I mean, given all of this, given everything that you've just said, are those, once you get to that point of finding that match, are the candidates and the employers getting at the right stuff to make the right connection? I think that could be an interesting question to dive into a little bit more, especially after this last year, when the expectations on both sides might be a little bit different than they would have been before.
Yeah, probably not to get too philosophical, but I think that's a really great point. I mean, that could be what this whole topic around talent acquisition, just why it's so challenging to get it right.
I think it's really challenging because I think naturally, as you're going through an individual or an interviewing process, whether you're an individual or a candidate or an employer, individuals typically have their game faces on during the interviewing process.
Right.
So you're not really seeing the true person or the true personality. And you really don't get the flavor for that culture or personality until you're in there. By that time, it's too late. So I don't know if there's an easy answer to that question, because we interview for skills and experience. It's probably a lot more difficult to interview for values and personality and that cultural fit in an organization.
And you're also limited by the types of questions you can ask.
Yeah.
Also, that it could get at some of that more interpersonal stuff, but you can't really go there. So you definitely, but believe it or not, we're coming up on an hour. Thank you both very, very much for all this information. And I took a bunch of notes, and I feel that there's so many follow-up conversations that could flow from this. And this is all really, really interesting. So really, thank you both. Thank you both very much for putting all the work into this presentation. Just a quick note that we have regularly scheduled meetings. The next one will be on June 24th. We will get a registration link up soon, and we will make sure that the information is up on the website. So please, if you have anybody has any ideas of future topics they would like to see, anybody we could bring in to have a conversation about something specific, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you again very much to Anne and to Cliff for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.